Have you ever been kind to someone, only to feel like they took advantage of it? Or worse, have you ever noticed how your kindness sometimes seems to push people away rather than bring them closer? It's a harsh reality, but it's one that we all face at some point in our lives. So here's the burning question. Why does kindness, a trait that we've always been taught to embrace, sometimes make people disrespect us? If you've ever felt like your kindness isn't appreciated, or that people take you for granted, this video might change the way you approach relationships. Trust me, this is going to change your life. Before we dive deep into the philosophy that explains this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. By doing so, you're helping support content that can guide you toward mastering your relationships. Stick around till the end, because understanding the core of kindness and why it can sometimes hurt is going to empower you in ways you've never imagined. With that said, let's get started. There was a man just like any of us, full of hope, dreams, and a heart that overflowed with kindness. He always went out of his way for others, ready to lend a hand, share a smile, and give everything he had for those he loved. But somewhere along the way, he started feeling betrayed. His kindness, once a source of happiness, began to feel like a burden to others. It was as though his actions were taken for granted, his words ignored, and his efforts were forgotten. You see, the Stoic philosophers, men like Marcus Aurelius and Seneca, had a profound understanding of human nature, and their wisdom teaches us something crucial about kindness. Kindness, when not properly understood, can lead to resentment, disrespect, and eventually heartache. Let's break down 6 reasons why kindness can make people disrespect you and how the Stoics approach this idea. Reason 1. Overgiving and expectation of reciprocity. When you put your heart and soul into a relationship, have you ever felt like you got nothing in return? Perhaps you put all your feelings into someone, believing they would return the favor. To make them happy, you went above and above, giving up your own time, energy, and resources. It was all worth it when they smiled. And just for that second, it seemed like the world was your oyster. The reality nevertheless dawned on them at some point. Their emotions differed from yours. Whether it's a romantic connection, friendship, or even a family one, this is something that many of us have experienced. We keep pouring out our hearts and minds in the hopes of receiving some good word or kind gesture in return. Someday we hope they'll realize how much we've meant to them. However, I must warn you that the expectation of reciprocity has the potential to devastate you. Reflect about it. You begin to lose your identity when you devote too much of yourself. In the pursuit of greater love, it's as if you're erasing your own self. Perhaps they'll realize how much I care if I do this one more thing. You think to yourself, perhaps then they will see how much I am worth loving. But the thing is, people don't appreciate the constants. It loses its uniqueness as you provide more. Do you remember a time when you felt that way about love? When you go out of your way to make someone happy, do you ever feel like they're taking advantage of you? Isn't it heartbreaking to give someone your heart and then watch them clutch it without showing any gratitude? Your selflessness goes unnoticed and you begin to doubt your value. However, the Stoics' teachings are applicable in this situation. An important lesson from the life of the great Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius is that genuine generosity should never be conditional, expecting something in exchange, for your generosity is a certain way to end up disappointed. The pursuit of another person's approval is not the source of genuine love. True generosity arises from a position of unadulterated selflessness, from a willingness to offer without any expectation of return. If you truly want to love yourself, you will love yourself enough to offer without expecting anything in return. Stop giving just to get. That is the main point. As a person, you should give because it's the right thing to do, and because you wish to improve the lives of others. You will notice a change in your relationships. Once you cease expecting anything in return, there will be no exhaustion. Happiness will instead wash over you. Those that care about you will automatically know how much you mean to them. And that is the finest part. Have you been expecting too much in return for all the help you've given? It might be time to loosen up and fall in love without expectations. Reason 2. Being too available. Allow me to transport you to a moment when you were really in love. Imagine meeting that one person for the very first time. Were you both thrilled? Your heart raced with each communication you received from them, and they were never far from your thoughts. It was the wonderful sensation of being noticed, comprehended, and treasured. You did, however, observe a trend over time. The more accessible you were, the more they treated you like a commodity. At first, it may seem like a good thing to be overly available. Do you not want to be the one someone turns to in times of need when you love them? Obviously you are. But here's the catch. Your mystique will begin to erode. If you're constantly available to answer their phones, have a chat or do a favor. Philosophers of the Stoic school, such as Seneca, had a firm grasp on this idea. When availability is unbalanced, it becomes useless. Let your mind wander to the last time you invested so much in a relationship, only to find that the other person seemed uninterested in returning the favor. When you're never truly valued, you begin to feel like you're only a safety net. And when that occurs, regard wanes. Since you're constantly there for them, they no longer bother to pursue you. It's somewhat similar to being in a relationship. When you find yourself having very little time for yourself, perhaps you are familiar with the feeling of having put the needs of others before your own. The most crucial component of the equation, that you must also prioritize yourself, was overlooked. As you began to give and give, people won't learn to respect your time if they can constantly reach you. The worst part is that you may come to despise yourself if you let yourself be defined solely by your willingness to help other people. Have you ever given someone your undivided attention to the point that you forgot about yourself? Perhaps you knew it was hurting you more to spend hours chatting with your ex following a split, but you did it nevertheless. Another possibility is that you're in a circumstance where you're the rock for those closest to you, but they seem to never be able to return the favor. After some time, doesn't it get painful? Maintaining an air of secrecy is healthy in any connection. Whether it's a friendship or a loved one, things that are out of reach sometimes captivate people. That charm disappears when you're always reachable. Also, people don't value your time and company anymore the more accessible you are. Your time is precious. Use it wisely, the Stoics would advise. Putting your own needs first and establishing healthy boundaries is more important than being egocentric. True, but when you're always willing to help out, people will start to take advantage of you. Just for a second, I would like you to consider your romantic life. Tell me when you prioritized your own needs last. When was the last time you gave yourself permission to recharge? Recover after a breakup or just be alone? Doing this after an ex-lover has harmed you is really difficult. Staying there in the hopes that things would return to as they were is an easy trap to fall into. But keep in mind that being someone's continual choice isn't all that you're worth. Your relationships will change for the better once you learn to value your own time again and take a step back. As a result, you'll begin to appreciate yourself more and others will take notice. Do it in a Stoic fashion. Reason 3, ignoring your own needs. When you were in a relationship, did you ever put your partner's needs above your own? Perhaps you put your partner's pleasure last because you were so busy tending to their needs and making sure they were happy that you forgot about your own. You sacrificed a piece of who you are in an effort to prove your devotion. As a result, a part of you started to deteriorate from the inside out. Consider the moment your ex-partner ended things with you and how your entire world seemed to crumble. Perhaps you poured your heart and soul into a romance that lasted months, if not years. Your love, trust, time, and energy were all sacrificed. How much did you fail to attend to your own needs before everything started to fall apart? You may have neglected your own emotional, mental, and physical health in your haste to cater to your partner. Then when the split occurred, there was complete and utter nothingness. A lot of us don't understand this at first, but when we put other people's needs above our own, we end up becoming into them. When we change who we are to suit another person's expectations, we end up losing who we are. Sacrifice to the point of self-destruction is not love. That is extreme selflessness. In order to make other people happy, how many times have you put your own needs on the back burner? Perhaps you felt your spouse didn't get you when you did the things you enjoyed. If you spent too much time with your pals, you may have neglected the ones who were there for you. Putting their wants before your own may have even caused you to neglect your health. However, after all is said and done, what remains? When a relationship ends, all that's left is a depleted and exhausted you. Following the precepts of Stoicism does not constitute egotism. To be whole and capable of loving it is really essential. A prominent Stoic philosopher, Marcus Aurelius, often said that we should love ourselves first and then love other people. In order to offer to other people in a healthy and sustainable way, you must first give yourself the care and attention that you need. When your heart is hurting, as it often is after a breakup, it's tempting to start blaming or neglecting yourself. However, remember that self-care is an important aspect of becoming well. Taking care of oneself is essential, and that includes eating well, exercising, seeing old friends, and discovering fun hobbies. Neither giving nor receiving. Love can be healthy if you don't take care of your own needs. The issue then becomes, during your previous relationship, what self-care practices did you cease to practice? If giving up anything had any positive effect on your life, what would it be? The moment has come to reclaim those possessions. Look at yourself. Prioritize your own pleasure. That way you may love others without sacrificing who you are. Reason 4. Over-prioritizing others' feelings, even if it hurt. When was the last time you prioritized another person's emotions before your own? Maybe you discovered that you were willing to put your partner's needs before your own, even if it meant denying yourself emotional fulfillment. You pretended to say yes when you actually meant no in an effort to avoid an argument. If you wanted to maintain the peace, you had to agree to things that didn't seem right. You could feel their affection growing for you as long as you continued to provide them joy. Actually, though, you merely became someone else entirely. All of us have been there. We've all been there, trying to brighten someone else's day while simultaneously sinking into a deep depression. Perhaps you pushed your own feelings of grief to the side so that your spouse wouldn't have to deal with them. Perhaps you were hopeful that the relationship would improve if you continued to accommodate their feelings, so you let things lapse. However, the reality is that you cannot give from a vacant vessel. When you were in love, did you ever put the other person's happiness above your own? Maybe it was a circumstance when they were distressed, and you chose to ignore your own pain in order to fix theirs. Perhaps you were aware of the relationship's neglect, but decided to ignore it so as not to raise a stir. That carelessness will come up with you in due time. Giving other people's emotions too much weight might cause you to muzzle your own voice. When you bury your feelings, bitterness and animosity fester. You fool yourself into thinking that love is about giving up all for the other person. Yet the foundation of genuine, long-lasting love is not selflessness but rather mutual understanding and respect. And this is where relationship problems might arise. You start to lose your identity when you put other people's emotions before your own. You may feel like you're pouring your heart and soul into someone, but if they don't return the favor, the imbalance will lead to pain for both of you. Realizing this while you're devastated from a breakup isn't easy. After your ex leaves, you may start to doubt everything you ever thought was important, including whether or not you put your own pleasure first. The Stoics' advice, nonetheless, is useful in this situation. Prior to helping other people, we should prioritize our own happiness as taught by the Stoics. Before you can love another person, you must first love yourself. Respecting yourself emotionally and meeting your own needs will change the way you approach relationships from here on out. Since you seem to be willing to put the needs of others above your own, I must inquire, how often have you done this? How many times did you stuff your emotions because you were determined to make them happy at any costs? You are not alone if you have done this. Love, many of us have mistakenly believed, is constantly putting another person before ourselves. But love also entails being authentic, and it is in this state that healing may commence. Reason 5. Not setting boundaries. When you're in a relationship, have you ever felt that you couldn't say no? Perhaps you loved your lover so much that you rationalized letting them transgress your limits. It's easy to rationalize letting your guard down while you're really in love. Yet doing so always ends up draining you, making you feel ignored and disrespectful. Remember a relationship in which you poured your heart and soul into it. Perhaps you were the type to answer yes whenever your spouse asked, regardless of how you felt about it. Maybe you give them too much of what you have or allow them to walk all over you. However, what was the benefit to you? Were you both given adequate personal space? Were the sacrifices you made appreciated? Did they not appreciate it, though? The fundamental problem with failing to establish limits is this. When we let our guard down in a relationship, we risk becoming someone else entirely. Giving of yourself may seem like a noble act, but it really reduces you to a shell of your former self. Neglecting your wants, needs, and emotions leads to an imbalance that will ultimately manifest itself. You've probably been there. Perhaps you learned the hard way, following a breakup, that you should have been more assertive in the past. You were receptive to your ex's unfair treatment of you. It can have been anything from persistent rudeness to complete disregard for your emotions. Without limits, love can only ever be partial. When your heart breaks, the pain of a breakup may be excruciating. The foundation of the partnership seems to have been your weakness in asserting your independence. Here, however, is where the insight of the Stoics is useful. Following the advice of Marcus Aurelius, the greatest wealth is to live content with little. This includes setting limits in relationships that protect your physical, mental, and emotional well-being. The goal of setting boundaries is not to physically separate two individuals, but rather to provide an environment in which both may thrive. My question to you is this: when was the last time you established reasonable limits with someone in a relationship? Did you let things to get away from you too readily in your most recent romantic experience? Were you able to resist the urge to ignore or mistreat someone? Fortunately, there is still time. As you begin to heal after a breakup, it is crucial that you learn to create boundaries. It's not about isolating yourself from others. Rather, it's about creating the mental and emotional room you need to thrive. Relationships are better when they have boundaries. Their absence leads just to bewilderment and pain. Reason 6. Being too forgiving. The power of forgiveness begs the question, have you ever been too ready to forgive someone? Have you ever been in a relationship where you continued to forgive your spouse? Despite their repeated hurtful actions, you seem to think that if you could just forgive them, the hurt would go away. But how do you deal with a person who refuses to grow from their transgressions? When you forgive over and again, you end yourself in the same painful loop of grief. All of us have been there. Someone you cared about profoundly injured you, yet you were able to forgive them. Perhaps it was an initial slip-up that you easily overlooked. Your forgiveness, however, became an explanation for their actions as time went on. The fact is that sometimes it's not about forgiving, it's about letting go. You kept telling yourself that love required forgiveness, but that's not always the case. Imagine falling in love for the first time. Have they broken their commitments to you? Perhaps they betrayed you, said terrible things, or shattered your trust. After each time you forgave them, they seem to find a way to screw up even more. Were any changes ever made? Is it more likely that you continued to forgive them in the hopes that this time things will be different? A good thing is forgiveness, but it becomes harmful when you think you have to forgive without making any changes. Perhaps you were overly lenient because you feared being alone, or because you had high hopes for a brighter future. Repeated errors do not foster actual love, though. Accountability, respect, and real change are the ways it flourishes. Unfortunately, it's human nature to continue forgiving an offender after a breakup. Perhaps you're still unsure if it would be the right thing to do to contact out and express your forgiveness. However, you should know that genuine forgiveness entails letting go of the hurt, not taking on further agony. One way to retain your peace, as Marcus Aurelius so frequently said, is to shield your heart from people who would do you harm. Now I want to know, how many times have you found it in your heart to forgive someone for the same transgression? Were you worried about losing them if you stopped forgiving them? Admitting that you were lovingly acting out of love is okay, but loving also entails understanding when to distance yourself. To forgive is to release oneself from the shackles of the past and the pain it has inflicted, not necessarily to make amends. You must question yourself after a breakup, how severe the hurt was and how many times you forgave. If the other person doesn't change, then forgiveness, which is a healing technique, won't work. Forgiveness in its purest form does not entail letting others walk all over you. Rather, it is making the conscious decision to heal, progress, and move on from the emotional trauma of the past. Conclusion: when we're nice to people, why do they treat us with such contempt? A lack of self-respect, limits, or expectations might make one look weak. Thus, the solution is obvious. Authenticity, limits, and self-care are 3 tenets of Stoicism that can help you avoid being taken advantage of. Never forget that genuine compassion isn't about draining yourself dry. Rather, it's about giving from a position of power and dignity. With that said, thanks for watching, and until next time.